Yesterday, Donald Trump Jr. made a return appearance in a closed-door session of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The Mueller report's evaluation of the meeting Donald Trump Jr. had at Trump Tower during the presidential campaign to obtain dirt on Hillary Clinton from Russians suggested that everyone in that room might well have been unaware of the possible violation of law in such a meeting. But last night, the President of the United States said they would do it again. Joining us now is a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Democratic Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado. He's also a presidential candidate. Senator Bennet, your reaction to the events of the last 24 hours. It was just last evening that we heard Donald Trump say he would violate that law.
I think what you said at the end of the last segment is exactly what it all comes down to. These people have no respect for the rule of law. They have no respect for our democratic institutions. They have no respect for this republic. I think this is the most unpatriotic administration we have ever had, and it is staggering. They'll go to any length to put themselves above the law. They'll attack the FBI. They'll attack the intelligence agencies. They'll rely on Russia before they'll rely on our own intelligence agencies. But it's been consistent since before he won. I mean, he was unpatriotic before he won.
Yes.
This is a guy who attacked...
There was no false advertising, except on policy, where he said he was going to solve every problem in America. But
I alone can fix
on who the person was, there was no false advertising.
There was no false advertising. He was clearly a cheater. He invited the Russians to interfere with our election explicitly, and now he's inviting them to do it again. He called, he ran by asserting that John McCain was a failure for having been in solitary confinement in Vietnam. This all fits together. It's like the guy hates America. He doesn't love this country.
You were in the meeting with Donald Trump Jr. yesterday. What can you tell us about it? Why was he called back?
I can't say anything about what.
Can't say why.
Can't say what
can't
happened.
Say anything
can't
about
say
in the
why.
room.
Can't
Will a transcript eventually emerge from what happened yesterday?
I don't know, but what I do know is the Senate Intelligence Committee is doing its job, looking seriously at Russia's interference with our election, and it was non-trivial. I mean, I can say that. And the only person in America who seems not to still admit that the Russians were doing it is Donald Trump. He stood next to Putin and said, well, Putin tells me that he didn't do it, so he must not have done it. No one else believes that's true. I can tell you that the Republicans on the committee don't believe that's true.
If you are the nominee on the top or the second part of the Democratic ticket, Donald Trump is saying he will take information, that any information he can get about you from any foreign government in the world.
Yeah. Listen,
especially Norway. I guess he thinks they might have something.
Every single Western democracy is being attacked by Russia. If you talk to any ambassador from any country in Europe, they will tell you that Russia is supporting far right-wing parties in their countries that are seeking to destabilize the democracies themselves. That's what's at stake here. And the world needs an American president who will stand up to that, not endorse it, not ask for the Russians' help, but that's what we have. I don't know how the guys at Fox live with themselves with this president doing things like that, but that's what he's doing.
The presidential debates are 2 weeks from tonight. Actually, the first one will be 2 weeks from last night. What are you hoping to achieve in the debate? You're going to be one of a lot of people over 2 nights. We don't know how many minutes you'll end up with in the night you're in there. It could be very few.
I know. I've asked my family not to blink. Although I don't know who they want to watch. So.
Do you have a strategy for somehow grabbing a moment?
I think what's important to me in this moment in American history where we have reached the breaking point that we've reached is to have people that are willing to level with the American people about how screwed up the system is that we have. We were a mess before Donald Trump got there. Mitch McConnell, we were talking about him earlier, Mitch McConnell and the Freedom Caucus have tyrannized America. They've tyrannized the Republican Party. They have immobilized our exercise in self-government. If that continues for another decade, my generation is going to be the first generation to leave less opportunity to people that are coming after us. And we can't continue on this way.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.